Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the first interactive discussion from the Cultural Bridges in Germany conference. The topic for today's discussion is integration of immigrants in Germany and the EU best practices. And what I'd like to do is, since we didn't have a chance for really question and answer from the first two speakers, that's one of the priorities for the session, to really allow for questions and comments based on the first two keynote addresses. And what I'd also like to do is really learn from the insights from the new speakers who have joined us. Allow me to maybe say a few words about those speakers who have just joined us, and then I will maybe ask the first question to get the ball rolling to the speakers, and that will be my only question, and after that I will then give it to you to ask your questions and also give any feedback that you have for the speakers. So we are joined, first of all, to my left by an advisory board member of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, Ambassador Dietrich von Kyaw, who is a former German ambassador, has served around the world, and I think in many ways you're wearing the German hat today, but also the diplomat hat. So we're really looking forward to hearing, actually from also a former diplomat. Sometimes it's easier to actually say also your true perspectives on things. So for many reasons, we're very happy to have you here. I see also Dr. Götz Kaufmann has just joined us in the back. If you could maybe switch seats with one of the ICD interns. If you mind giving your seat to Dr. Götz would be great. Dr. Götz Kaufmann is, first of all, a professor at the ICD Center for Cultural Diplomacy Studies. Many of you may know we offer MA programs at the ICD, and I'm very happy that Götz is teaching our case studies on cultural diplomacy class this semester. In addition to that, he is a professor at the John F. Kennedy Institute for North American Studies here at the Free University, Berlin. So Götz, I'm very happy that you could join us as well. Just sitting next to him is Hannes Strauss, who is actually a cultural diplomat, I guess would be the word I would use to express you. On the one hand, a fairly well-known musician in Germany and also around the world. What's interesting is, as a German, I think rock and roll seems to be your main forte. So really international when it comes to the music. We've had the chance...
He's the only useful member of our panel.
Maybe the only useful member of our panel. So I'm really happy that we can also have somebody from the cultural sector, so to speak, joining us. So Hannes, I'm very happy that you're with us as well. We also have Wolfgang Yakis, who I've known also for a number of years. His current position is founder and director of BAMEC, the Berlin Academy for Mediation and Intercultural Communication. BAMEC provides intercultural and diversity training for companies and public institutions in over 50 regional destinations and non-national cultures. So again, we have someone who's actually practicing cultural diplomacy and cultural bridges, so to speak. His Excellency Mr. Yakis, we all know, former Foreign Minister of Turkey, and Ferry Pausch, we also know, the director of the Deutschlandstiftung for Integration. So unfortunately, we didn't succeed with the gender balance for this panel. However, I think as a group, as a circle, hopefully we can succeed with the gender balance. We did succeed, I think, in terms of interdisciplinary, international approach. So in that sense, there's also a high responsibility for the women in the audience to be very active in this discussion. Let me begin by just asking maybe a simple question. Maybe Ambassador von Kyaw, since you just joined us, you might be willing to offer some perspectives in response. When we talk about integration, I always struggle really in terms of what does integration really mean? What is the goal? In America, we have this famous analogy of the melting pot, the idea that everyone sort of melts into this boring gray soup. And I say to myself, do I really want to have a gray soup where everything is melted into this one mess? The Canadians very often are talking about a model that they refer to as a mixed salad, where you can actually mix things together, but an olive stays an olive, a carrot is a carrot, a tomato is a tomato. But it is mixed together as one sort of, collective dish. And I think there, I would prefer to have more mixed salads than, let's say, gray soups. So my question to you, I think Germany in many ways is also struggling with this question. We hear references, foreigners should integrate this and that. But the question is, for me, what do we really mean by integration? What is the goal? So I just ask you, maybe even your personal perspectives, where would you like to see Germany 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in terms of, let's say, multiculturalism and integration? What would be for you the goal, or what direction are we going in terms of the future of Germany?
Originally, the European integration process was meant to be political and economic. And putting together nations and peoples who had always been pretty different from each other, even fighting many wars, devastating civil wars, including 2 world wars. But before that, they had other smaller ones, but nevertheless devastating in relative terms already in those times. So what we tried to put together in the wake of the experience of 2 world wars was something that actually didn't really necessarily belong together. except that we were regionally in a similar corner of the world and had a parallel negative historical experience, total destruction. And the total destruction of Europe at the end of 45 meant also a kind of abdication of Europe. The United States and Soviet Union were determining our fate, and we were nothing. So we tried to get our act together. But on the basis of this terrible history of ours, where extreme nationalism had made it very difficult, practically impossible, to aim at a melting pot. And even the salad thing is going to become very difficult for us. What we can achieve is, on the basis of common interests, to slowly, step by step, develop, and of common cultural similarities. We can, and common historical, negative historical experience. All this in a step-by-step process over decades and decades, and even 1 or 2 generations, might allow us to develop a feeling for European, genuine European citizenship, not replacing the national citizenship, but adding to it in a positive way. So, in that context, integration becomes an exercise that has its limits, but also its relative possibilities. And we are talking now, first of all, of integrating us in this European Union as Europeans.
Switch.
Aha. I hope that works better. This is our first endeavor, to integrate ourselves in this union context, us Europeans, 27 people, distinct from each other. And then comes the next problem, and that is how to deal with non-EU citizens who come from the outside and also need to be integrated. So I have just simply indicated we have a twofold problem. And it's easier to integrate a Frenchman or a French citizen who comes to Germany and decides to live here as, for instance, a Turkish citizen. But basically, it's a similar problem we have. And we are facing, and it's a long range issue which you can't solve through policy decisions and then some rash and fast implementations.
Okay.
To begin with.
And sometimes when we talk about integration, multiculturalism, it can be very abstract and theoretical. I think a lot of the work you're doing every day, also at BAMEC, is actually trying to deal with some of these challenges that Ambassador von Kyaw was talking about. Could you tell us just really briefly, concretely, what can be done? I mean, if we really do want to do more to, let's say, facilitate access between cultures and to enable more exchange and dialogue between different peoples living together, either in the same city or the same country, what can be done? Or could you tell us maybe some of the best practices from your experience?
I think one of the first best practices we need to do is to get clear on the words. And even when I go to companies and tell them that I have a little thing for etymology, they agree that things need to be clarified. So let me just elaborate a little bit on that salad image that you said. I think if you put tomato and salad and carrots and lettuce and all these things together, they have no taste at all. What you need for the salad is a sauce. And I think that's where the taste comes from. And then the metaphor doesn't work anymore because the individual ingredients don't do it. You have to find some kind of sauce that connects them all to get that flavor. We're not talking about the sauce, we're only talking about the individual ingredients. And I think that's a problem with this whole debate about integration and multiculture. We don't get clarity about these words. I think integration has very little to do with multiculture. I think integration is just the opposite of multiculture. I may take the position here of a devil's advocate with that, but I think Integration means that you bring, as the ambassador rightly said, bring together some things that don't belong together on the first side. And that these together create some kind of new meaning. Integration is always something metaphorical. And multiculturalism, as I read it, has nothing to do with metaphor. For me, multiculturalism is a little bit of, let's say, a collective assimilation. So people are losing identities, gaining a new form of identity. But that is not the objective of integration. So what I would like to do, and this is exactly what I also do in companies, is to tell them the difference between multicultural on the one hand and interculture on the other hand. In particular, in German language, we tend to use these two words as if they were synonyms. In English sometimes as well, but they have clearly distinct concepts. And the question is, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about multicultural, or are we talking about interculture? And if you ask about integration, I think we should talk about interculture much more than about multiculture. And then integration is a challenge. How do you create something that is in between, that connects these people, or these ingredients, the salad pieces and so on, the sauce we are talking about. What I'm trying to do with companies is to get a good sauce, to get the interculture, to get the culture in between, to find a working definition where people stick to their identities, where they stay tomatoes, where they stay lettuce and everything, but they find some shared meaning, and on that basis, they can work on and do something together. But I'm completely opposed to any concept of multiculturalism where people would just bring in their identities and share with some others, lose their own identities a little bit and so on. I think that doesn't take us further. And I would really call for a very clear distinction of terms.
Well, thank you very much for that, also for helping to develop the analogy. So we're now talking about a mixed salad with a sauce. We learned from Ferry earlier today about one possible sauce in terms of sports, in terms of how sometimes indirectly, by actually having a joint activity together with others who have different origins, one can sometimes indirectly maybe create such a sauce or create such an interaction. Hannes, I wanted to ask you, how can maybe music also serve as a sauce? In the sense there, one of our advisory board members is the former Hungarian ambassador to the US, András Simeoni. He grew up in Hungary during communism, and he said for him, rock and roll had more of an impact on him in terms of also shaping his identity than politics. And really during the Cold War period in particular, rock and roll for him, that was his language, that was his way of really also expressing and also listening to different ideas. So I'm wondering maybe from your point of view, how could music perhaps serve as a sauce? Or maybe you even have examples, best practices from your own experience where music can sometimes allow people to transcend borders and come together and even express things that maybe they can't express in the context of a panel discussion or in writing. I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on that.
Well, thank you. First of all, I like to cut it short. The thing is that music has to do with a message, okay? And if you're not into the foreign language at all, which I think from my German classes way back then when I was growing up, they all had English in school and French and stuff like that, but nobody was getting to the real message of a song, okay? For example, let's take a rock and roll song like Long Tall Sally, okay? There's a little phrase in it to make it clear what I'm talking about. In short, it's going like, let's have some fun. And the singer is continuing, That's like nonsense, like beep-bop-a-lula and all that kind of 50s easy talking stuff, but the message was different. It was you know, using rock and roll or the music itself with a message talking about sex, okay? So in the 50s or 40s and 50s, where this kind of music was very popular, was like punk or today's hip-hop, where you have a message, not only the text or the music, the melody, okay? And to me, that was the infection, that music has something to do with, let's say, a cultural act, if you understand what I'm saying. And that was really, I was hooked on that, not only the music or the beat, and that made everything different. By listening closely, to what this is all about, not only beep bop lula, if you understand what I'm saying. And so let's come to the, I don't want to make it long here, to the end. It's very difficult if you're just consuming things like politics, music, and so on. If you have, if that doesn't hook you, if you're not hooked to it, if it goes into one ear and straight out on the other, if you're interested in things, if you have maybe somebody who's a mentor telling you about what's happening there, what this is all about, like politics or music, okay, then there's a little door you can walk through and be in a different world. And I think this is, to me, that is Thousand Island sauce. Do you kind of understand what I'm saying? It's, that's the door that's opening to into action. For example, maybe, do I have a little second here? 2 weeks ago, we had an international show going at the Ballhaus Berlin, which is Berlin Mitte, an old school dance hall. And I was meeting back an old Berliner from the occupied days who was raised in the French part, okay, in the French sector. I was growing up in the American sector. And this man, he wasn't here for a long time. And he came with a band, intercultural band. And one other musician from England was asking, how was it in those days in Berlin? And he said, well, blah, blah, blah. And he was talking about French and blah. And I recognized that, and I said, wow, where did you grow up? And he said, Reinickendorf. In fact, that was, you know, the French sector. And I didn't have to do anything with that. I wasn't into French music or culture or, you know, food and all that. They had it there in that district. To him, that was completely different than to me. I was hooked by the American virus, okay? So, and that was like, wow, you know, growing up in one city, occupied city, we had many, like Heidelberg, Frankfurt, and so on. So even today, it's the wall and, I mean, the cage, let's call it a cage, and the door I was talking earlier about, if you have the opportunity to get into it, then you understand what I'm talking about, and I think this is...
Well, thank you for sharing that. If I could just maybe add to that, together with our graduate students also in the MA course, we looked at some other powerful examples where music really has succeeded in transcending borders. A classical example you may be familiar with is during the Cold War period, when the Americans would send jazz ambassadors in addition to political ambassadors. The idea being is that those jazz ambassadors, who are jazz musicians, could actually represent other facets of American identity in sometimes a much more powerful way than politicians. So that was one successful approach in the past. Another interesting example is if you look at, let's say, the peace process. We were talking last night also in the panel discussion a little bit about the Middle East. With Israel and Palestine, there are some fascinating examples. One project actually that one of our MA students presented, Virginia, was actually about Heartbeat, which was actually an NGO that's actually performing music and actually doing music workshops with Israelis and Palestinians. So again, through that joint activity of music, they're able to build bridges. A more famous example would be Daniel Barenboim. You may have heard of the East-West Divan Orchestra, where again, you know, they have Arabs from the entire region and Israelis performing beautiful music together. A final example, just since we're talking about music, is the U.S. Embassy did something interesting in Morocco. This is about, I think, 5 to 6 years ago, called I Love Hip Hop in Morocco. And it wasn't about bringing American rappers to Morocco. It was a matter of helping to set up a stage and a platform to allow Moroccan musicians to actually perform hip hop. At that time, it was very difficult, actually, for hip hop performers to perform in Morocco. So there was a different kind of cultural bridge where the American Embassy just served as a facilitator, just to help allow that platform to take place and actually privilege the Moroccan Moroccan musicians themselves. They recently did that in Cairo, actually last year. It was actually one of our advisory board members, Cynthia Schneider, a project called Sing Egyptian Women Sing, where they also set up a stage actually in front of the embassy, and it was kind of like American Idol or Britain's Got Talent that they did for Egyptian women. So again, it was not bringing American music, but helping to actually respect and privilege the local voices from those cultures. So there are many different things one can do, I think, with music to bring people together. So just as a few additions to the powerful examples that Hannes also shared. The final person I want to ask a question to before I let you ask your questions to Mr. Yakis and also Ferry and everyone is Götz. Now, Dr. Kaufmann, we have covered many case studies in the course that we're teaching to the MA students on cultural diplomacy, serving as a bridge. We were reflecting last night on our panel discussion, too. We had a panel discussion here at ICD for the US elections about also, last night we were talking how America has changed under the Bush administration, Obama administration. We tried to predict, what was coming in the future. Since we're here talking about cultural bridges in Germany, I wonder if you could say a few words also how you see, very briefly, how has Germany changed, if at all, when it comes to this issue of integration, and where do you see it going? We heard some insights today from Ferry in terms of statistics, but I'd be curious if you could maybe share with us, from the point of view of cultural bridges, has Germany changed, let's say, in the last 20 years with this issue of integration? If so, what are the most substantial changes? And how do you see it going? Where do you see Germany 10, 20 years ago on this issue of integration?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, okay, Germany is quite a difficult field for the question which has been raised. In particular, I want to quickly respond before to that what you have said. I mean, multiculturalism and interculturalism are different ways of dealing with an issue. As a scientist, I would rather try to contextualize it in terms of a work which is done by Phil, a Canadian colleague of mine who wrote a book recently about becoming multicultural, immigration and the politics of membership in Canada and Germany. And he has quite an optimistic prognosis, which I would not have shared before reading, but now I do a little bit, because he saw some general changes. Actually, Germany has never been an immigration country. The biggest problem in Germany is the understanding of immigration as something which is not belonging to Germany. This can be traced back to the 18th century, where, like in Germany, like the state building started with the jus sanguinis idea, like German is what is of German blood. So each one who's coming until now, actually, and who has one parent who is German, actually is German, and the others are not. This is very different to all other countries, which I know. But this has changed a little bit, and in particular in the last 20 years. I believe the biggest problem for integration of immigrants in Germany, and this refers to the recent books of Buschkowski, like the mayor of Neukölln, and the Sarrazin book, which is, I don't want to discuss this. This is not a scientific book, it's just a reference to that this topic is always coming up again and again. It's a problem of group theory integration, disrecognition, I would say. And integration bases on two principles, approaching and approachability. So the one group which needs to be integrated need to have the will to be integrated, and the other group needs to be willing to accept the people. Both is not given. And this is the reason why we have, in my opinion, the state of the art of multiculturalism, because there is no real interest of integrating people, and this is basically a social problem in Germany. So in my opinion, when I look forward, I'm a very optimistic person, because I believe if people like raise education and understanding of the situation, we can change the system in a way that it's better than it was before. But right now, my situation, when I need to give an answer to the question, is with reference to Adorno that there is no right living in the wrong life, and we are out now living in the wrong life, I believe.
Let's take at least 4 or 5 questions or comments. We really want to know, what are you interested in? What are the questions you would like to respond to? What are the points you would like to raise?
Hi, I'm Magdalena. I'm from Heidelberg University. I have a question concerning the title of the panel, Integration of Immigrants. And we talked about Germany, but this morning you talked about Turkey. And, well, the issue was raised indirectly. Turkey is facing influx of thousands of Syrian refugees, and not all of them are planning on leaving as soon as the political situation in Syria will be solved, reconciled, anything. So there has been an increase in Syrian business in Turkey. What do you think, or if we talk, I think that's the only case we can compare, like can Turkey learn something from Germany in integrating Syrians who want to stay, or what do you think? Is Turkey becoming an immigration country, and what are the aspects?
Great.
Here's Faruk from Turkey, from Antalya, Akdeniz University. Question about the integrity in Germany. Actually, what we are talking, we are using a language which we all could understand. Now, in this case, English. Especially the Turks, which has been selected from the German government, 60s, 70s, the German government didn't make any test or any questionnaire about the education and abilities that they have. They just give a peep. They have to check of if he is healthy or not. And they collect people from everywhere on Anatolian. In 60s and 70s, if you got back to the past, education level of the people was not comparable with Europe. And today is the confrontation for the German government or German people in between. And I think a few years ago, they changed the rules of immigrant about the language. First of all, you have to be able to talk in German. So in this case, maybe, is it the question or answer of the question, maybe first of all, we have to teach the language to the people.
Thank you very much. That's a question I think in particular
As
for some of the
sauce,
Germans
sorry,
on
I'm
the
sorry.
panel.
Maybe
Okay.
this should be the sauce.
I always ask myself what happens to mother tongue when immigrants come, because as you know, each European should speak at least 3 languages: mother tongue, neighbor language is okay, and lingua franca. Let's say English is this nowadays. But what happens with mother tongues? So when immigrants come, they should learn the language of their environment and forget about their mother tongues? Or do they have the right to learn it, to develop it in their new country? This is my question.
My name is Carolina Torres. I come from Mexico, and I'm intercultural trainer. My question is for the Mrs. from BAMIC and the other person, I don't remember his name.
Hannes?
Hannes,
Hannes,
yeah.
okay.
In Germany, in the late years, maybe from the 70s, people start to talk about integration and interculturalism. But actually, it hasn't been done enough to reach this point where you can really say that the migrants really get integrated into the society. As you said, in Germany, there is a lot to do still to reach this point. So my question is, in your opinion, what is missing? What do we need to do in Germany from both sides, from the migrant side and also in Germany, to reach this point in which we can talk about interculturalism and not multiculturalism, no? That was both concepts used in a different way.
Mr. Yakis, I think we have to give you the microphone first. You have some work ahead of you. And then I'll maybe go from left to right, and we'll allow each of the panelists to respond to those questions that they feel most appropriate for them. But first, Mr. Yakis.
Thank you very much. On the question of the whether Turkey could constitute a bridge, I said at the beginning of my presentation that it depends on what you understand from bridging. And on many occasions, Turkey cannot constitute a bridge. I gave the example of whether France needs Turkey to bridge it with Tunisia or Algeria. And I said, on the contrary, Turkey needs France's mediation to reach Tunisia or Algeria or Morocco, because they are closer. And I did not want that to give the impression that Turkey could constitute any bridge at all. But Turkey's certain experience of Turkey could constitute a source of inspiration. I tried to select my words. it may constitute a source of inspiration for certain parts of the reforms and democratization process that certain Arab countries will go through. And I agree with what this charming lady who raised this question. And in addition to what she mentioned, there are also negative elements which constitute an obstacle for Turkey's constituting a bridge between Europe and the Arab countries. One of them stems from the Arab side, because we, the Turks, are taught at school that Turks brought stability, peace in the Balkans and in the Middle East. But I happen to be the longest serving Turkish diplomat in the Middle Eastern countries. I served 4 years in Syria, 4 years in Saudi Arabia, and 4 years in Egypt. My experience there is that the Ottoman legacy is remembered more with negative sides in these countries. So to be a Turk is not an advantage there. It's an obstacle, because they remember the Ottoman times with negative side more than the positive sides. This is the difficulty for Turkey to constitute a bridge with the Arab countries. The difficulty that stems from Europe is that Europe, there are two things, or there are many things, but I will mention only two. One is that Europe considers itself as a fortress Europe. That is to say, it has become more introverted after the establishment of the European Union. I was a member of the European Convention that was drafting the European Constitution, and we had a very big fight there whether Europe should be defined on the Judeo-Christian basis. The source of Europe is Judeo-Christian thought, philosophy, and which means that it would exclude or it would alienate anything which is not Judeo-Christian. And this is reflected later on in the attitude of France and Germany and Austria, to a certain extent by Denmark and Holland also, to their attitude towards Turkey's accession to the European Union, saying that, but Turkey is not a Judeo-Christian country. So what does it have to do with us? This was the approach, and this also exists still in the mind of several political parties in European countries. So this is one of the difficulties that stem from there. And the other point, again from the European side, that it is the Islamophobia as a different version of xenophobia, is on the rise in certain European Union countries, whether we accept it or not. So the moon is very romantic when it is distant, but when you come close to the moon, it is very unhospitable. When we talk of the multiculturalism, when it is distant, when you don't face the problems of it, it may look interesting. But when you see, when many Europeans see scarred ladies in their district, etc., they are faced with something that they were not faced with in the past. So when you come close to the different cultures and you have to make a final decision, then this decision may be different from what you were thinking at the moment where you were discussing the philosophical aspect of it. The multiculturalism is good, etc. But when you have to practice it, then it may turn to be different. On the question of regarding bombing of Syria, of course, I am one of the persons in Turkey who is the founder of the ruling party in Turkey, but who disagrees with Turkey's Syrian policy. So Turkey should not have get involved to that extent in Syria, and perhaps should not have received that type of blame, which is justified to a very large extent. Regarding the question from a person who was from Heidelberg, can Turkey learn from Germany for integrating Syria? I think the nature of the Syrians who come to Turkey are entirely different. They are escaping from something which is temporary, and as soon as the situation will be stabilized in Syria, we presume that they will go back. But many of them have relatives in Turkey, and if they stay, it will be at that time that we will discuss their situation. For this gentleman from Antalya University, teaching of German to Turks, if a Turk sees his future in Germany, I am in favor of his being taught German from the nursery and the kindergarten and primary school, etc. He should be speaking German without a foreign accent. He should be grown up together with the German children, so that he should have the same mentality, because he is going to live in this country. And from his family, he will still maintain his Turkish identity, and this will add a richness to the German culture. A person who speaks perfect German, a Turk or Turkish German citizen of Turkish origin, who speaks German without a foreign accent and who is successful in the society, this is a richness. Regarding the lady from Slovenia, should the immigrants learn the language of the country that they go and settle down there? Again, what I said for Turks in Germany, it is valid for other people coming from other countries. If they see their future here, they should speak the language of this country, and their mentality should grow closer to the people, to majority of the people in this region, without losing its original identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yakis. Now I'd like to maybe go from left to right, if you'd agree. Maybe Ferry, if you could respond to those questions, also more relevant for Germany and integration. Please.
Maybe I can add something to the language discussion. We think for Germany it's important to speak German properly, because it's the prevailing language here. The case yet is different for every country. For instance, France and the UK, as examples, they have immigrant crowds who actually do speak French and English properly when they come to the country, yet they do have integration issues. So it is out of the set of issues you have to deal with, the language is one. It's not the single one. It's not that integration succeeds as soon as everyone speaks the language. To the question if you should forget your mother tongue, I don't think so. I'm not a scientist in language cases, but what I learned from my work and listening to scientists is, of course, practice the language at home. For instance, the Minister of Integration from Lower Saxony, Aygül Özkan, she said she's a perfect German speaker without accent, but she says, with my children at home and their little children, I speak Turkish, because that's the mother tongue and I want them to learn the mother tongue. And she's totally right. As long as she gives the children an opportunity to go to kindergarten and learn with peers the German language. Because what I also learned is it's much better to learn your mother tongue properly from your parents rather than get the new language improperly from your parents. So yes, of course, try to get into the lingua franca as well. But this is really up to the parents, and apparently it's a good practice to speak your mother tongue at home with your children, have this special language, and then, but get your children out to the peers as early as possible. And I just read an article that 2 years in kindergarten is not even enough. It should be 3 years so they can make up for all the disadvantages they get because their parents can support them with education or with the language or whatever else.
Excellent. No, I can just agree with you on that point. My son is also, we're teaching him 2 languages. He's 2.5 years old. My wife is Tunisian, Italian in background, but grew up in Berlin. And so so far it's working fairly well. So in the school, everything is German. She speaks German to him. I speak English. So just as a case in study, I think it definitely is possible. And it's a great asset, I think, there for my son, being fluent in both. He'll have many more options as opposed to just one or the other. So just to underline that. Ambassador von Kyaw, would you like to respond and add?
Well, as far as the language issue is concerned, if you want to have a job that goes beyond brooming the streets, you have to learn the language of the country in which you want to have a job, a decent job, and even make maybe a career. That's not a question of integration only. It's a question of simply getting the right job. And we have this also inside the European Union, this problem. You don't need to be a Turk in Germany to have this problem. And in the European Union, we work on the principle free movement of persons. But in practice, and persons should go there where the jobs are, inside the European Union. At this moment, everybody should come to Germany. But they aren't coming. Some are, but when they are in really desperate situation, as, for instance, presently young people in Spain. But are the Frenchmen coming? The Brits? No. Because of language problems, of educational system differences. So in practice, this cherished free movement of persons inside the European Union has its limits. And we'll have to work on this. We have to bring, to learn at least one, if not 2 languages. We have to, more, in addition to your own, at school, we have to, to harmonize to a certain extent educational systems, recognize exams one has passed, etc. You have to facilitate movement. We haven't reached that stage inside the European Union. And then comes, in addition, the problem of illegal immigration, where people who suffer from the consequences of illegal immigration, not only in Germany, even more in southern France, in Italy, in Greece, in the Netherlands, even apparently some Danes feel threatened. Why, I don't understand, but at least they do. You have now a problem with illegal immigration that leads to endangering normal immigration. And so we are trying to establish frontier controls, not only to keep illegals out because we don't like illegals, but also because this illegal inflow endangers the fair treatment of those who are legally within our borders, because you mix them all up. I can tell you that one of the problems the French have with you, Turkey, as a prospective member of the European Union, is that they're simply mixing you up with all the North Africans. I know of no Turk who wants to go to France. You all want to come to us, if you want to. Nowadays, fortunately, you are no longer even interested in coming to us. You are happy enough with your own country, which has a good economic development, and that's positive. But the French are mixing up you Turks with the North Africans, because in southern France, it's a real huge problem of illegal immigration. So, and one has to understand this. It's, by the way, creating extremist rightist movements, Le Pen and all this. And that makes, again, the French government in election time deal a little bit bizarre on certain issues. And we are all, as politicians, we have all these problems. So this is a thing we have to keep illegal immigration out. But then, for those who are here and come here to us legally, we need to give them the fair treatment and give them the chance of job opportunities to live positively here. And if they want to really integrate. If not, at least they must learn the language and abide by our rules. And not everybody who came in the old days from Anatolia is, even if they wanted to, is capable of living according to these rules in Germany, for instance. At the origin, we wanted these workers to only work in Germany and then go home. And this is why we never checked their language capacities. We felt, oh, they should do simple work, which the Germans at that time didn't want to do anymore, and then they should go home. But unfortunately, or fortunately, from their point of view, fortunately, they stayed. Now we have these almost ghetto kind of situation in big cities, and as a result, because these people can't integrate due to their intellectual capacities, they are hurting the image of Turkey in Germany. And they have added to this problem we have in not following up what we promised to you, namely to go into a step-by-step process towards that should end up in your full membership. I hope we can still correct this over time, also with your help, if you don't overdo it with your reactions out of disappointment about us and our behavior, but we also have this situation that Turkey has developed an enormous strength in economics, is strategically situated in a vital corner of between Europe and Asia. And so I think you have good assets if you get your act at home together, so that we might in the end see the light also in Europe, and in spite of some integration problems, we might be able to accept you as full member if you still wanted it at that time. However, in the meantime, we have this problem of promoting the language knowledge, which for me is the key, not necessarily to total integration, but to full enjoyment of all the opportunities a stay in Germany should offer, regardless of whether you stay for longer, forever, or only for a limited period. And this is, I think, what so far has come out here, the importance of language studies. And this has nothing to do with overwhelming people and forcing people to forget their cultural background. This is, some politicians play that game, but it's not serious. We want our Turks here to speak German and Turkish and stay connected also with Turkey. We have no problem. Nobody forces Turkish people here. Some politicians may be, but it's not an official policy to force anybody to become German. Why should we? We are interested in positive contributions by Turks and others from other countries to the German economy, to the German society, and this is what we desire and what we are trying to work for.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Malja. We have 2 minutes left for the panel, but I want to give next to Wolfgang and Hannes, because some of the questions were directed specifically at you. A brief response would be great.
Yeah, I will do that, or I'll try that. The direct question to me from my colleague from Mexico. So what's the matter with integration in Germany, and what are things both sides could do? First of all, I think that without developing an exaggerated stereotype of Germany, I think Germany is or the German culture is a rather segmented, masculine culture. What does it mean? It means that I think many Germans unconsciously prefer putting people into certain boxes and to label people. That's not only Germans who do that. There are others doing that as well. Yeah, but I think that's one example. We are a very performance-driven culture, and I think we assess people on performance, whether the assessment is right or wrong. That doesn't matter. But we like to do that, and we put people into boxes. Why do I say that? I say that because I think our integration problem in Germany is much larger than the one we are discussing here. We have been discussing intercultural or multicultural here, but we have only discussed national or international integration and inter-ethnic integration. What about the social integration of various intra-German social spheres? What about in the integration of handicapped people? What about sign languages of hearing impaired people? I don't see that on the Tagesschau, the main news here. We have that in other countries. So we have integrational problems on many other fields other than migration. What about the integration of gays and lesbians in the workforce? Now, we have a gay mayor here in Berlin and a gay foreign minister. That helps, but I think there is more to do. So, since you mentioned we are missing a little bit the gender part, I would like to add this aspect to it. We cannot just limit this whole integration debate to national cultures. I think that would be falling short a lot. Now, what can be done? From both sides, he said. Who in Germany, or what could we do from the German, from the receiving side? First of all, I think the question you need to ask is who is responsible for the integration? Is it schools? Yes. Kindergartens? Yes. And I think a lot is done there. German classes for migration children are offered. There are also Turkish language classes in German schools and in other language. Of course, you can't do that with every language because it might be a little bit difficult to get the teachers for everything. But then what I'm missing and what I try to practice with BAMIG and in the business training is the private sector could do a lot more, because they are the ones who receive the employees. We have a huge problem in Germany in the area of requiring skilled workers in many, many fields. 20 years from now, Germany will be not performing as it's doing now economically if we are not able to develop a welcoming culture for employees from, be it Spain, right now it's many Spanish people coming in, or from anywhere else. So we need to have this kind of welcoming culture, and companies, small companies and medium-sized companies in particular. The bigger ones are getting there already, but small and medium-sized companies need to develop human resource strategies how to receive employees from wherever or whatever background they may have. It also means gay or lesbian or hearing impaired or other employees. So I think the private sector needs to be trained and sensitized for that. On the immigration side, what can they do? I think to narrow it to the one thing we have been discussing, language, language, language. Much has been said. I really liked the statement of your Prime Minister the other day, where he said that Turkish people in Germany should learn language, and not only that, I think that was my favorite quote of last week, they should also read Kant and Hegel. I like that. Maybe you can tell me whether he read Kant and Hegel, because I read Kant and Hegel, and I mean, it took some time to understand that, even if you read it in German. I needed the English translation to understand Kant, so I'm not sure if that's a good concept, but I think that's a main ingredient. If you learn...
Somebody who read Kant prepared the speech for the Prime Minister.
I guess so. I guess so, but no.
We need to start
as I said,
wrapping up.
yeah, I think language training is one of the main ingredients, and what people should do is they should also look for shared identities. They should see that the source that I alluded to earlier could be in the soccer club. So they shouldn't nourish their Turkish or Greek or whatever culture finding a Turkish soccer club in Berlin and a Greek soccer club in Berlin. Why not join just the average soccer club with everybody else? Because that would be the sauce adding to it, or the music, or whatever else. So do not live your national culture or ethnic culture by finding other activities within that, but use those other activities as a bridge. I think that can be done. And the other thing, the most simple thing, ask and explain. Explain people why you are hurt, what's the pain level. As I think in the very first statement, we had a huge or painful statement. There were people at pains for whatever, and I think many Germans don't understand what pain or painful situations people have gone through. And I think you can't expect people to understand that unless you explain it to them. That lady earlier gave a very good explanation, and I think that is helpful. Explain, and on the other side, ask. There are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. I'm getting urgent time warnings from the back, but I want to give Hannes and Götz at least a chance for maybe a closing statement. But we do have to pay attention to time because we're expected at the Danish embassy soon, so please.
Thank you. I'd like to cut it short again with music. and language, the connection. It was some 30 years ago, I met a French guy who was stationed here as a soldier in the occupied city, and he was French. He was from Lyon. He still is, in fact, and still is a good friend. And we've been talking on we've been meeting on a rock and roll show at the Deutschlandstiftung with big stars from that genre, and we've been talking about music, blah, 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 and rock and roll. So we got closer, and someday I came over to his house, and he was playing some odd music to my ear, which was not rock and roll, a different kind of music. It's called Cajun music. Okay, you maybe never heard about that, but that's from America, basically from Louisiana, and it's from immigrants from France, some 200, maybe 300 years ago, or 400, I'm not sure. So some French been taking their old language, the classic French language, to America, so they exported the music and language to Louisiana. They got settled in New Orleans, singing and playing this kind of music, and exported it to the world, back to the world, through America. So I was sitting there in the 70s or 80s with that French guy talking about French language, music, and I didn't know about anything like this. And he said, you know, Hannes, what's very interesting, if I meet a rock and roller from the UK or the US, they don't even understand this. And this is coming from Louisiana, which is America. Not really, it was coming from France originally, but it's like something, an American language. They lost out of it. I think I need to cut it short, I'm sorry.
It's a powerful example of it.
But I think this is very interesting to answer your question. To lose a mother tongue, it could happen if you're not practicing it. Like Mark, we do have 2 children, and we teach them English and German. So this is what we can do. But there's a progress in a language. If it's the Cajun, French, American language, or the German language, we had old words from France, for example, from the Huguenots. We lost out of that. You know, we still have some words, but they don't know about it anymore. So we have to practice this. It would be a shame to cut it short. And I hope I made my point clear.
It was a powerful point. I have to be referee here and look at the time. Götz, we don't really have a chance to allow you to properly respond, but would you like to give maybe a 30-second kind of a closing statement or something? Otherwise, we're not going to make the embassy, but at least...
Okay, I thank God that I have the ability to speak very fast. Actually, I just want to refer to one thing that is the JFK experience. The institute where I come from is since the 50s working together with people from overseas, and we are all always just using English, and it's working pretty good. And I want to answer the main question, what could be done for proper integration best practice? And I want to refer to the theory which I've raised with approachable and approaching, and a bit contrary to response to that what you said, because I think what should be done from German side for proper integration is to become a good imperialist in terms of that what George Soros said, like acknowledging the power and being open to be approachable by those which have to come and live here, which are, in my opinion, not Turks but Germans. And the other one is the demand which we have for those which come here, and this is exactly like acknowledging the existence of the intellectual capacity to integrate. They need to know and to accept that they can, and then they need to take efforts to do that.
So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in expressing our gratitude to all of the panelists for the discussion. Thank you very much.